And I believe we are live. I will wait for chat to give me the go-ahead. But until then, good evening everyone. Welcome back to Thompson Talks for Monday, the 30th of March, 2026. I hope you're all doing well. This will hopefully be a quick stream for once. I know I say that every single time, but not as long a script today. Well, not script. Series of links that I can then waffle about without thinking what I'm going to say next. And so dance on the head of a pin and hope not to get cancelled. That's not been going well so far, has it? I will be addressing all of your super chats, questions, contentions, comments, anime suggestions, as some of you end up doing that I inevitably do not watch. I will address all of those at the end of the show. But I thought we would have a little bit of an update today. Since I am your jester, I have returned to dance and entertain you. I thought we would talk about the fading aura, the generational aura loss currently undergone, self-inflicted, mind you, by Reform UK. Because it's been a rough week for Reform, for its defectors, for its new candidates, and for former friend of the show, Matt Goodwin. It's been pretty bad. And those of us who have migrated over to Restore Britain and are optimistic about the prospect, well, I suppose it's for all of us to gain. I see Charlie Sansom is in chat, good friend of mine who should be doing more content, who I have deputized as a moderator, so be on your best behavior, chat. He's watching you. And as I understand it as well, there will be a Restore branch meeting kicking off tonight, involving my friend Lewis Brackpool, so even though he is not watching, everyone should wish him luck. Someone said that Zoomerism speaks to me like the Green Goblin mask. Very true. I try and keep my vernacular above board, but unfortunately, I have been terminally online for about 10 to 12 years now. I grew up playing Call of Duty, Titanfall, Destiny raid runs, Overwatch. I was a gamer back before I discovered girls, I suppose. So I still have not lost that part of my personality. Mea culpa, mea culpa. Anyway. So, we are living through a kind of Baudrillardian hyper-reality with Reform, where I can see someone's question in chat. If you want me to answer that question, you can super chat it at the end. We are living through a Baudrillardian hyper-reality with Reform, where they are insisting that the optics are excellent, that they have a sound vibe, that they have a momentum, that they are going to walk into Downing Street comfortably. And this is, it's like manifesting. Right? They're trying to speak it into being. And if they would have said this 6 to 8 months ago, they would have had the polling and the success to support it. But now they have subsided down to about 25 to 22%. It's not to say they can't recover it. But it is to say that as things get worse in the country, as Reform's prospects sour, as more people that would have supported them before the Tory defectors drop off the polls or migrate over to Restore Britain, their aura seems to be fading. The feeling of inevitability, the mandate of heaven conferred onto Nigel Farage around early 2025, seems to be subsiding. And as I said when I went back in Reform's 2024 conference, one of the first to coin the term, the feeling like you're at bingo night at Butlins is both inappropriate and just not it. Like, it's inappropriate because we shouldn't be so jubilant to be doing karaoke with the Chagossians. Weird that Nigel Farage is a blood and soil nationalist for Chagos, but thinks you can be an Englishman just based on how you feel. It feels inappropriate to have fireworks and fanfare when the country itself is falling apart, mainly because of the issues that Reform will now refuse to address, despite being the party ostensibly to address things like mass migration and ethnic sectarianism and Islam. And also because the party itself is not doing so hot. Like, the things that they are commanding you to get hyped about, to celebrate, are not really resonating with the public. And so when they do things like this, I don't want to pick on Jack Hadfield at all again. Very solid independent journalist, very nice guy. But when Farage was interrupted at a Croydon rally, by the way, Croydon, I mean, why is there a mayor of Croydon? Like that, who is he? Immortan Joe? I mean, Croydon is so dystopic at this point. But the mayor of Croydon is basically Will Smith in I Am Legend as all the crack vampires scuttle around. Anyway, they're not going to win in Croydon. West Wickham is still majority white British, but other than that, total wasteland, demographically and in terms of law and order. But when Farage was interrupted by a few leftist plants and protesters in the audience, and he was getting heckled, he didn't handle it as self-assuredly as he used to. And they had a pre-loaded, boring graphic up on the screen. What he's trying to do is recapture the magic of Trump's 2016 circa to 2020, where Trump would say, "Go home to mummy," "Mummy's here, she's voting Trump," all those sorts of things. And it just feels forced and inauthentic. And so when it's insisted that, as Jack captions, again, I don't want to pick on Jack, absolutely incredible scenes from Reform UK team for having boring graphics ready to go at the press of a button for when a heckler interrupts them, laugh my fucking ass off. Is it absolutely incredible? Again, let's just pause here. Absolutely incredible scenes. I don't want to pick on the people, on the supporters of Reform at all. Again, as I've said before, Reform and Restore voters are a Venn diagram. We want the same sort of solutions for the country. It's just more about what people think is possible, I think. But is this really absolutely incredible? Is this the winning vibe? Because the demographics are very old. A lot of silver hair there. The aesthetics are garish and are inappropriate for the severity of the moment we find ourselves in. And despite all the people that Reform has poured scorn on, cast aspersions out on the online right, Lower Seaters have a live event coming up, which I may or may not be going along to, pending logistics. And they can put out a few tweets, and they can pack out a room with, under 30s, under 40s. So, for all of Farage's much trumpeted TikTok figures and the youth vote, as we'll see later, the polling is not so great for Reform, for the youth vote. Jack Anderson's doing his university tours, and I saw a screenshot from the live stream the other day, and there's about 4 or 5 people in the room. Not excellent. Meanwhile, I was at New Culture Forum's event in Brighton on Tuesday. Much smaller level of organisation, mainly unpaid volunteer organisers, and I had a packed out room. Lots more young people there, including lots of young Reform people. So, Reform are clearly not, and I'm not, this isn't me trumpeting, blowing my own trumpet, this isn't me just glazing the guys over at Lower Seas, even though they deserve it. It's that there is clearly an ambient anxiety about the issues Reform are meant to address. There is clearly an appetite for youth engagement in these issues, and Reform are failing to be the lightning rod for all of this atmospheric static to strike. And one of the reasons for that is just the boomer core messaging. Farage got up at this rally and said, "This is 1940 all over again. The very existence of our nation, its culture, its identity is under threat." And as you can see here, I'll just pause that. If I
40 all over again.
Why is it not letting me pause that?
Our nation, its culture, its identity.
Ugh. Anyway, as you could see, mainly silver hair, couple of young people. But theoretically, let's break this down. This could just be, boring, recycled, typical platitudes. Who are the Nazis that Farage thinks he's fighting? It could well be the left are the real fascists, and this sort of tired rhetoric that is philosophically ignorant. Or, as Farage is so proud, as he so often tells us, Could it be that Farage, in his own rhetoric, is giving away that he thinks that he needs to contain a force to his right? He gave an interview to The Times last year saying, I think I'm the last chance for democracy. If I fail, wait till you see how far-right the thing that comes after me is. Recently, he said that there is a threat of a real ethno-nationalist far-right coming up, and Reform are definitely not that, so you should vote Reform to keep them out. In his mind, if it's 1940, who's Adolf Hitler? Is it Rupert Lowe? Is it anyone that is marginally to the right of Nigel Farage on any given day? Because he changes his opinions like the wind, like the weather. If you frame things in this way, you are seeking the approval of the establishment that have brought our country to the precipice of ruin, and therefore alienate the people that are sick and tired of being called fascists and Nazis and racists over and over again. Everything is boiled down to World War II framing does not resonate with anyone below the age of about 50. And one may say, okay, I'm reading too much into it, but maybe the evidence might be here that Farage really, really believes this, because his most recent defector that he announced on stage with said fanfare, with said fireworks, was a man named Aaron Roy. He is a Labour councillor in Hartlepool. Why are Reform taking in Labour defectors? Okay. The entire modus operandi of Reform is a brick through the Overton window aimed squarely at the Uniparty. And instead, it seems that by taking Liberal Democrat, Green, Labour and Tory defectors, Nigel Farage is rebuilding the Uniparty under a teal gazebo. And this isn't what his own voters want, it's not what most of the public want, and this is why you've got a kind of de facto proportional representation system manifesting in a first-past-the-post system with the Lib Dems, Labour, the Tories and Reform, and the Greens all on about 15 to 20% each. And the majority of people are not going to vote, because many people don't feel represented. It was actually Restore Britain that reactivated about 7 to 8% of the vote that had fallen off from Reform, seeing its Tory defectors, weren't going to vote, and now will for an authentic alternative. And so, it gets even worse, because a Labour defector is bad enough, right? Remember the previous Labour defectors from Newham, who said, we love refugees, we love immigration because it gives us curry and different kinds of dress that we aren't going to wear. Well, then it turns out that Aaron Roy is an Indian national. Yeah, you heard that right. He's not a naturalised British citizen. He is an Indian national, here, presumably, on indefinite leave to remain, something that Farage and Reform have promised to abolish. He is therefore a foreign national who is an elected councillor in Britain. Farage has made a big hullabaloo after the Gorton and Denton by-election, and the embarrassing loss of Matt Goodwin, which we'll get onto later, by saying Commonwealth citizens, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Nigerians, even Canadians, Australians and New Zealanders should not be able to vote in British elections. Nobody but British citizens should be able to vote in elections. Okay, that's a flagship policy. Then why are you running an Indian national, why are you celebrating an Indian national, defecting from Labour to your party and presumably running him at the next local elections in May? Is it just because you're struggling for candidates? Okay, it's better to not run a candidate than to destroy your credibility, because this flies in the face of your policy promises. How are you going to revoke the right for Commonwealth citizens to vote if you're standing them as candidates? The same with the Bangladeshi, I think it's in Portsmouth that they're running. Bangladeshi here on a student visa as part of the Boris wave, who says that he wants to return to his homeland someday, according to the guy that selected him as a candidate, and who also wants to go and work in Dubai. Maybe you can join Richard Tyson, his girlfriend, out there. Aaron Roy also, as we've got here, is the head of Mariners United Sporting Club. Mariners United is a non-whites only football team. He is an anti-white racist. He won awards for his DEI advocacy in a video that Charlie Downs made, pointed that out So Reform UK have taken an Indian national from the Labour Party who runs a DEI football team whose entire career is based around ethnic chauvinism, who seemingly only wants to jump ship to reform because he is the archetype of the subcontinent striver and treats our domestic politics as a way to pad out his Indeed or his LinkedIn, to add another line item on his CV, to farm ISAT and grow his social standing relative to his subcontinental peers. Reform thinks this is a good use of your time. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, for those who still watch my channel and still support Reform, out of a pure electoral expedience, or because they believe Nigel Farage is hiding his power level, fine, look, I'm willing to hear the arguments out. You know, I was mulling over said arguments last year. Is this what you expected to vote for? Is Mr. Aaron Roy, Indian national, who hates white people so much he starts a football team without them, is this what you expected to vote for when you voted Reform UK in 2024, when you bought a Reform membership, when you went to Reform conference, when you sat in an audience, for example in Hartlepool, where his defection was announced? If you still intend to vote Reform at 2029, is this what you wanted to vote for? By the way, just the theory that he is purely in this for his own personal gain, that he is just a grifter, seems to be vindicated by the fact that a local Green Party organiser, Georgina Holyfield, says that she saw him at a Left Alliance meeting a few days ago with your party and the Green Party. So, dyed-in-the-wool leftists, Georgina Holyfield, who I assume is just your average white female progressive, 31, socialist, God bless you, love, you've been misled. Seems that she thought she had a brother-in-arms over at the camp of the Saints party, until Roy took one look at the polling and decided that, well, I can retain my principles, but jump over to Reform, because of course there isn't an immigrant or minority that Nigel Farage doesn't want to take a photo with, and I will be instantly propelled up the career ladder in Reform without needing to compromise on the fact that my entire career is centred around advantaging me and my ethnic group at the expense of the native population. I mean, it seems that the grift the Green Party are running by trying to be a patronage system to immigrants and minorities seems to be run even more efficiently over in Reform these days. And then he delivered a speech. And I just want to ask, if there's anyone that was in the audience there and has sort of since smelled the vapours because of what they were presented with, I wonder if you can respond and inform me what the people in this audience think they're clapping for. Someone in chat said, Restore will be taking on board Muslims at some point. What do you all do then? Restore are not obliged to select any one given person as a candidate. Restore Britain will defund all non-Christian religious institutions. They won't get a single bit of taxpayer money. Restore Britain want to ban Sharia law, ban cousin marriage, ban the burqa and niqab. They want to ban halal and kosher slaughter. And more importantly than just sort of the easy counter-jihad measures that some other parties are slowly cottoning onto, they want to outright ban immigration from many countries. I think every Muslim country, actually. And India. And other African countries too. Why would this attract a single Muslim candidate? And if it did, well, one, their ability to authentically represent the majority of the British public may be impaired compared to a British counterpart who is not a Muslim. But two, we would be very suspicious as to the motivations of such a person, considering they would be trying to get into a party that is proposing policies that are directly against their interest. So, very strange. Someone said, I've been told there's a Muslim Restore member in the Swansea branch. Okay. Doesn't mean he's going to be a candidate. Doesn't mean that perhaps he's all that well informed on the policy. But also, look, I don't think Restore Britain should be in the business of discouraging people to vote for them. You can vote for Restore Britain no matter who you are. It just doesn't mean you'll be selected as a candidate, and it doesn't mean that you'll be able to bargain on ethnic or religious lines for special accommodations when it comes to policy. You won't. This is a party for British people that will do things according to their preferences and prejudices. If you like that, if you would like to live in Britain according to a specific way of life, and not have any carve-outs or handouts or special consideration for anything that doesn't correspond with our preferences and prejudices, fine, vote for Restore Britain. You'll live in a much better country afterwards, I'm sure. But Restore Britain are not a party that gives any quarter to Islam. Anyway, back to this. I'll play this clip. Can anyone in chat inform me as to what the people in the audience think they're clapping for here?
And a little bit of fact, I'm the first BAME councillor in Hartlepool's history. And thank you. And I've always carried my responsibility of representation. And
Reform are promising to abolish all DEI mandates, repeal the Equality Act, well, in name only, but whatever. They're promising to restore meritocracy. This guy is saying, I am proud of being the first non-British councillor in Hartlepool. I am proud of taking up a spot in our national politics that should be otherwise occupied by a British person, let alone, just a British citizen at the very least, right? Let alone an actual British person. He is saying, I have moved over to your country, I haven't got citizenship, but I have an elected position in your politics, and I see my primary concern as gaining power and prestige to my ethnic group, which is not yours. And the audience clapped. Now people are saying, oh, they're probably just scared of being called names. That doesn't mean you have to clap for it, right? It makes sense if Nigel Farage is petrified of the accusation of racism, because he hasn't learned that it has no power at this point. It makes sense why he would admit every DEI hire he could, right? While Matt Goodwin would hug a Sikh, why Farage would appoint Layla Cunningham as Mayor of London candidate and Zia Yusuf his shadow Home Secretary, or let him cosplay as one. But why would the people in the audience clap for this? It could well be, as someone said, they just couldn't hear what he was saying, but hey, they've got pretty big speakers, they've got a mic going. Is it just that they've been socially conditioned, like a scene out of Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, to clap for whatever is being said, because they have so much emotional investment in reform being the solution, in hyper-reality fashion, that the gap between what they want reform to be and what reform actually is doesn't trouble them, because they just don't think about it. Other people are also saying boomers. I mean, yeah, this is... The Second World War narrative really has one-shotted quite a lot of people over the age of 50. Sorry, just the spectre of Adolf Hitler does not rest like such a dead hand on my conscience that I think I should give my country's political system over to Indian nationals. And then, there's another candidate, as of today, as pointed out by Basil Gray. So this is Anas Hugan, Anas being an Arabic name. Don't know where he's from. Apparently he's a veteran. Fine, thank you for your service. However, he has since deleted his Twitter account, because it has been found that he responded to a post by Basil the Grey. Basil said, "It is now official Reform Party policy that Axel Rudakabana is as British as you and me." After Nigel Farage said that to be English, you just have to identify as English, and to be Welsh, you had to live in Wales for 5 to 10 years. Therefore, Axel Rudakabana is Welsh, according to Nigel Farage. Anas Hugan, a Reform candidate, says he was born here, so he is. It's not just that this is the absurd logic of people who believe that anyone born in Britain is as British as you and me, or anyone that gets a British passport without being born in Britain, or anyone who subscribes to British values, or anyone who gets a passport or is born here and does not abide by British values, therefore making the values pointless, and those who betray British values by committing horrible crimes, but face no consequences for the betrayal. All of those people are British. You know, that's very clear on the rules here, guys. It is that this Reform candidate went out of his way to respond to a post using the Southport murderer who hates white people and killed children as an example, to say, yes, I recognise this man is British. These are your Reform candidates. People who go out of their way to insist that Axel Rudakabana is as British as you. The inverse, let's see who Reform deselects. Indian National, who runs an anti-white football team, celebrated by Farage himself on stage with fireworks. Man who says Southport murderer Axel Rudakabana is as British as you, selected as a candidate. Chris Parry, Falklands War veteran. He is deselected. He was Reform's Mayor of Hampshire candidate. He was deselected for offending Jewish people. No, sorry, scratch that. For comparing a private Jewish emergency services, Hatzolah, which is, they basically do ambulances and they drive around dressed like the police, even though that should be a crime because you're not allowed to impersonate a police officer. He described them as cosplayers. They are cosplayers. They're pretending to be the police exclusively for Jewish people. Now, people will argue that this ambulance service is available to everyone in the community. Problem is, apparently the number is only within the community. Are they causing trouble? No. But is this an indicator that certain communities are given wide berth to be not integrated, to have sequestered ethnic zones? Yes. And so, he then compared this to the Muslims riding around on horseback in Manchester that were pointed out by the to the police by a man who was filming and just shocked and incredulous to him. He compared it to them. He also responded to a tweet from Catherine Blakelock, who was the former head of the Brexit Party before Farage took it off her, saying, can Christians in Britain set up their own police and patrol certain neighbourhoods? Well, of course not. But asking the question is itself the sin. Because we are the only ones that are meant to make accommodations for foreign ethnic and religious groups, and we are meant to have them stitched onto our culture as if it is as if it is a bit of fabric upon which multiculturalism forms a tapestry. We are just the blank canvas. We have no identity, no culture, no distinct heritage, no ethnicity of our own, no claim of ownership to these isles. Instead, we just have to be the container in which other cultures are poured into to make this sort of nutritious mix that ends up just separating like oil and water instead. Parry said, remember that these cosplayers have no more jurisdiction or legal authority than ordinary citizens. They are a community organisation, not a legal entity. It's the same with the Islamists on horseback, but if it offends you, I'll remove it. He has since been removed as Reform's candidate. He's been condemned by rabbis. He's been condemned by Farage. Parry himself pledged his undying loyalty to the state of Israel. Fine, you know, maybe he's been there before. Maybe he has a deep affinity for the Jewish people. Maybe he has Jewish friends. Or it could just be, again, the sort of post-war liberal narrative that is endemic to people of a certain age. His thoughts on Israel aside, he has been suspended for pointing out that Hatzolah is a sectarian emergency services set up to cater to the needs of one particular ethnic and religious group that lives apart from the rest of society. So it's fine to point it out when it's Muslim, Or maybe it's not, because Reform is obsessed with winning the hypothetical moderate Muslim vote. But it's not fine to point out when it's Jewish. But it is fine to be a Reform candidate if you say, my interests are advancing the cause of non-white people. So ethnic sectarianism by Indian nationals is fine in Reform, but complaining about sectarianism, that's beyond the pale, even for Falklands War veterans. I mean, again, Chris Barry, a very qualified chap, total patriot. Sort of man that may be welcome in Restore. Isn't welcome in Reform. But an Indian national from the Labour Party, who until last week was going to join the Greens, well, he gets a standing ovation and fireworks and being celebrated as part of Reform. And so, it's been bad enough for Reform already, but then it gets worse. Matt Goodwin's had a really bad week. He's had a terrible week. He's been doing the rounds trying to promote his book, Suicide of a Nation, not to be confused with Suicide of a Superpower by Pat Buchanan, or Suicide of the West by James Burnham, or the tagline Immigration Identity and Islam, which he took from Douglas Murray's Strange Death of Europe, or the cover, which looks like Peter Hitchens' Abolition of Britain. Instead, Matt went on various podcasts trying to promote the book, and he has estranged everybody. The left think he's a joke because the book appears to have printed hallucinated quotes fabricated by ChatGPT. The right now perceive him as a gatekeeper who, despite decrying the professional managerial class and the disconnected Westminster elites on his Substack, in the pages of the Daily Mail, on GB News, and in this very book, he then went and told Peter McCormack that we couldn't possibly have a wholesale clear-out of the political class and have a new party, a fresh start, staffed by people whose hands are not bloodied by the previous decades of betrayal. Instead, only a professional political class of former MPs and academics, sort of learned, enlightened people, can take control of politics. The plebs, they're untrustworthy. They're incapable of running things. I'll watch this clip.
I could be your friend and have a beer, but like,
okay, let me just say though, let's just go to history for a minute, because I think history is probably most instructive. There was an anti-establishment political party once upon a time, and it was full of ordinary people. It was full of plumbers, farmers, electricians, workers, people with...
That sounds like the Green Party.
People with very little political experience. And it captivated the mood of the country, and it took off in the polling, and it did really, really well at a national legislative election, okay? Was considered to be the first real populist movement in post-war Europe. And that movement was the French Pugilist movement.
So because a post-war French populist movement, post-war France, by the way, completely desolated, in a state of absolute crisis, slightly different conditions. I mean, we're on the brink of being destroyed, but for different reasons. Because of this one historical instance, with no further information about the people involved, no further information about whether or not they fell out for personal reasons, whether or not they were incompetent, whether or not for all the goodwill in the world they just weren't up to the task at hand. For this one isolated example with no further context, you don't get to have political representation because you're an untrustworthy pleb. Leave it to the expert class, which is comprised of former Tories that have now defected to Reform, to clean up the mess that they made. Because this argument, by the way, is made in the context of not just defending the Tory defectors to Reform that have caused Reform to capsize in the polls well before Restore Britain even existed, but it also follows Matt Goodwin in the opening saying MAGA hasn't betrayed its base and being fully on board for the Iran war. And when Peter McCormack presents the sort of second-order effects, like mass inflow of fake refugees from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, up through What's the nation that borders Hungary? Serbia on the bottom. So from Turkey through Serbia, up through Hungary, especially if Fidesz win the next election, and into, Germany, France, Central and Western Europe and the UK. Or, screaming high gas prices when we've already got the most expensive energy costs in the developed world. When Peter presents all these second-order effects as why war with Iran right now might not be a good idea, Matt defaults to the rote-learned response of, well, I don't think it's a good idea for Islamists to have a nuclear weapon. Yeah, Matt, neither do I. I would be very happy to see the entire IRGC under rubble. In the abstract. If it were possible to actually do regime change with minimal casualties, minimal second-order effects, and for it to stick and be successful. I don't think any of those things are actually the case, which is why it has gone over so badly with the American public, and why Keir Starmer's decision to keep us out of it has actually brought him up in the approval polls. Meanwhile, Reform UK have had to flip-flop after Nigel Farage criticised Starmer for being unwilling to get involved. Richard Tice went on UAE TV and said we should be prepared to do whatever the Israelis and the Americans tell us to do, completely subordinating our sovereignty to nations overseas, no matter whether or not one may think that they are allies. And then James Orr got wind that J.D. Vance felt that his chances in 2028 would be destroyed if this war went badly. J.D. Vance now trying to position himself as peace broker to salvage his presidential bid. James Orr, being a smart political operator, told Robert Jenrick, hey, I know that you're like a massive Zionist neocon, but it would be really advantageous to come out for realpolitik and energy reasons and say, this isn't our war, this isn't the time. Jenrick then did that, and so it looks like Reform have no principles. Again, all of this is in the context, this entire clip is in the context of Matt defending intervention in Iran, even after his own party have said, this is a bad idea because it's killing us in the polls and it might kill our American allies. So Matt is saying, we can't let the plebs take power because they have no political instincts, they don't understand how politics works. Instead, we have to allow a bunch of failed Tory defectors back into government again to fix the mess that they made. Oh, and by the way, I have a really short-sighted view on geopolitics, really idealistic view on geopolitics. I don't consider any of the second-order effects, and my own party now doesn't take this line. Just a completely disastrous interview. Anyway.
Comprised of outsiders and anti-establishment people who were convinced they could take on Paris and redirect the direction of their country. That movement almost immediately collapsed on collision with power, because it turned out that when you fill a political party with amateurs and inexperienced activists, however well-intentioned they are, however much they believe in the country, the end result is often complete chaos. What you need to do, I think, today is harness the energy in the country that is anti-establishment with a vanguard of people who are genuinely anti-establishment, drawn from outside of politics, but who can also rely, if needed, on a handful of people who at least have gone through the system.
Going through the system makes you a creature of the system. Because if compromise with the system becomes a habit and a way of life, it is how you are going to conduct yourself when interacting with the system in future. This is why Danny Kruger's plan to bring the civil service to heel is inadequate. Because actually repealing the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010 and hiring and firing the civil service en masse is too much change too quickly for a man who has been used to incremental, piecemeal change, compromising with the system at every turn. And so what Matt is laying out here, actually, if you're properly listening, is saying Reform needs to harness the anti-establishment energy in the country, combine it with a vanguard of anti-establishment outsiders, and then accommodate a bunch of people that are already creatures of the system who will stand off their edges. What Matt charitably thinks he is doing here is taking experience and intent, goodwill, putting them together to make a killer political force. What is actually going to happen is that anti-establishment energy is siphoned off, contained, funneled down a cul-de-sac, and rerouted back into the agenda of the regime. This is what Dr. Parvini has said recently. Your anger, their agenda. Reform are going to capitalise on the public discontent with politicians, with the system, with mass migration, with the economy, with net zero, and they are going to funnel it into an engine that ultimately does not want to overturn the system, but wants to make it work more efficiently. Reform are going to save the system from itself. And in the process, they are going to squander the anti-establishment sentiment in the country. They're going to lead it up the garden path. At the moment, Reform is a Pied Piper entity. It's sad to admit. It's going to be emotionally painful for people that are invested in it being the solution, but it is necessary to admit.
I don't believe for a second that somebody who is a careerist politician would survive or be able to survive in Reform.
Nadim Zahawi, Robert Jemrick, Nadine Dorries, Jake Berry. The list just goes on and on and on. You don't get to make these claims when you've taken in Nadim Zahawi, and were going to make him shadow foreign secretary until you realised you would tank in the polls even further. And someone has also said, in chat, Matt Goodwin himself. Like, Matt, until very recently, had a compelling Damascene conversion story. He was bringing what looked like authentic research on the issue of demographic substitution, us becoming a minority in our own country. He was critical of the Tory party, of their failures, of microwave Thatcherism that left many northern towns abandoned without opportunities, deracinated, crippled communities for generations, and redistributed their opportunities to cheap foreign labour. He made all these points. But now it just seems like chameleonic shifting to whatever is most politically expedient. Now it seems like Matt is retreating from his insistence that you need an anti-establishment, authentic, properly representative force, and is instead defending Reform's decision to take in Tory defectors and dirty themselves with the stench of Conservative failure, because he's defending the cost that he has sunk into Reform, believing they are the insurgent anti-establishment party that would provide him with a safe seat in Parliament, which he didn't win. Now it seems like he's defending his own personal and financial interests, rather than actually presenting an anti-establishment alternative. And the moment you're in the business of making excuses rather than talking about reality as you see it, you're on the losing end of the dialectic. You are proposing a political project that is inadequate to actually solve the problems that we need solved.
Either in opposition or government. And the reason I say that is I speak to maybe 2 or 3 branches a week, every week across the country. And there is one line that I always say in my speeches, which is that Reform must not become a Tory tribute act. And it is
too late. When people see Nigel Farage surrounded by Tory defectors, that's what they think. And no matter what you tell them, no matter the yarn you spin, no matter the insistences you make on experience, they will still believe what they say. Too late. So, after Matt has already said, politics is no place for plebs. We can't become a Tory tribute act, but we need experience, which is why we have populated our top brass with Tory defectors. We come to this. So, I already played this clip last time. I'll play it again, because you need to understand why I am going quite hard on Matt here. 2 reasons. 1, credibility matters. And so, all of the things that we care about, our honest assessment of things like demographic replacement, mass migration, multiculturalism, Islam, cannot be tied to Matt as he is sinking. If Matt's credibility goes, the narrative cannot go with it, because the narrative transcends Matt. It is truthful, Matt isn't being truthful. And so it is important to distinguish the two so that Matt's misbehaviour doesn't sabotage our narrative. But 2 is because Matt decided to be really vindictive first. He attacked the Restore boys. Then, while promoting his book, he's gone around making veiled threats to Mai, Harrison, Charlie, and anyone else associated with Restore's careers. And he's quite smug about it. Passive-aggressive, vindictive, and smug. So I'm going to play this, and then we're going to contrast with the reception that his book has had. Because, again, he said all this in the context of promoting his new book, which has gone down like a brick in a duck pond.
And I feel very, very sorry, if I can just lastly say, I feel very sorry about the young activists between the ages of maybe 18 and 30 who have just wrecked their political careers by going down this cul-de-sac. They could have been really interesting, important people in our country's history. They could have been really significant people. And because they became detached from political reality, they've lost all relevance.
So, myself, anyone associated with Restore, anyone who doesn't support reform, they've become detached from political reality. We're no longer important. We're no longer relevant. Our careers are over, according to Matt Goodwin. Well, that was an ironic thing to say a couple of days before people found out that not only had he used ChatGPT for some of the sources in the book, because some of the hyperlinks in, I think 2 of the hyperlinks in the 12 total footnotes in the book had ChatGPT on the end of it. But also, as Andy 12, so he's a leftist, he seems to support the Green Party. I've debated him once before on Mike Graham's old show on Talk, and, well, I don't know. I don't suppose he has a very high opinion of me, so I don't think we share much in common. But he's done some very good work here, going through Matt's book. He disputes some of the statistics. I've seen some other statistics dispute this. Apparently Matt has misunderstood the multiple languages spoken by various children as not being able to speak English. Now, I think it's true that many of those children will not have English as a primary language, and also that talks past the cultural effect of having people speaking more than one language in our country is a problem for social cohesion. It represents the intrusion of a different civilization, a different tribe, because languages come from tribes, into our country, against the wishes, the expressed democratic wishes of the electorate. The most important part is that Andy finds a bunch of quotes that seem fabricated. For example, they also ignore the ancient warning of Cicero, the great Roman statesman, who insisted that the supreme duty of the state was to protect its own citizens and put them before others. We must begin, he said, with the people closest to us. In reality, Cicero is not quoted saying this, and definitely not in De Officiis or De Republica, the 2 major Project Gutenberg English language translations of Cicero. I believe this is an AI hallucination. Again, more quotes. Quotes James Burnham. Quote, the academic James Burnham put it bluntly many years ago. Power is exercised through organizations. Those who control the organizations control the instruments of power. Reality, Burnham said things vaguely like this, but I cannot find this quote. I believe this is another AI hallucination. There's a bunch. There's a Hayek quote. He accidentally says that Boris Johnson was in opposition in 2019 when he was foreign secretary, then leader of the Conservative Party, and then, elected prime minister. There is a Walker Connor quote that is also apparently an AI hallucination. There was... Who was the... Anthony D. Smith, who wrote The Ethnic Origins of Nations, one of the books that I'm consulting for a very long essay and a video on nationalism, which will eventually come out when I get the time. Apparently, here we go, there's an Anthony Smith quote that is not just incorrect, but apparently the opposite of what Anthony Smith said. So, Andy did this thread, he did a piece in The Spectator, and he also points out that yes, there were 2 references with ChatGPT at the bottom. Hence, the accusation, or the suggestion, repeated in an interview in The New Statesman, in The Critic by Ben Sixsmith, that if the book wasn't written by ChatGPT, well, it certainly reads as if it was, which is perhaps even more embarrassing because the book is just crap. And the problem with this, and people are going to go, oh, why are you attacking his book? Because we can't have people pushing the same line as us, which is true, that do it with such obvious schoolboy errors, especially when they are wearing the a badge of being a credible academic. Because then it not just discredits his own academic work, it then taints everyone making the same arguments. For example, I have frequently cited Matt's research, with the assistance of some other credible demographers, that by 2063, we will be a minority in our own country, extrapolated out as projections from ONS data. On present trends. By citing that, people will come back and say, oh, that's from Matt Goodwin, the guy who wrote his book with AI. So do you just take all that sort of stuff as not very serious then? What credibility have you got? All you right-wingers make it up. It's not a problem. This is why it is very important to point out the lack of credibility that Matt has demonstrated here. And it's also, and I'm not taking pleasure in this, bitterly ironic to say that those who don't agree with you that reform is the future, reform, you know, taking in Indian nationals as from Labour as defectors, is not the future. You've lost all credibility, all political relevance, and you're out of touch with politics. Meanwhile, you release this absolute turd with barely any footnotes, ChatGPT in 2 of the footnotes you actually bothered to include in it, a bunch of what seem to be AI hallucinated quotes, and data that is, the interpretation of which is questionable at best. And then, Andy challenged Matt to a debate on the topic, and it was hosted on GB News. And people thought, GB News, this is friendly territory for Matt. He hosts a show on the channel. He hosted it, I think it was the same night after this, actually. It's going to be a friendly environment. GB News are the reform broadcasting outlet at this point. Matt's going to have a total softball. If you haven't seen this debate, watch the full thing. Car crash. Unrecoverable crash out. I see people in the chat going, here we go. Yeah, for those of you that haven't seen these clips yet, dear me. One of the best moments is that Matt, in his uncanny ability to do accidental Alan Partridge references, decided to vindicate his claim that his book was not written by ChatGPT by asking ChatGPT. We're just going to enjoy this.
Ran it through ChatGPT. Do you want to know what ChatGPT says?
What did ChatGPT?
It said, this does not read like an AI-written book. There is no credible evidence this book was written by AI.
In
fact, no, let me finish, because this...
The computer told me that the computer didn't write it. If you... Hold on a minute. I've just had this thought. If ChatGPT didn't write the book, couldn't you show like previous drafts? Because if anyone who's written like a really long form research paper, or even, you know, like a book in your spare time, like I used to write fiction books in my spare time, back when I had such a thing as spare time, I would have multiple drafts saved at various stages. Wouldn't you be able to go back and present those as evidence that ChatGPT didn't write the book, because you can see the changes between each draft? Am I losing my mind here, chat? Wouldn't you have to not resort to asking ChatGPT, which also isn't a reliable detector of what is and isn't generated by ChatGPT, because it's a large language model trained on an aggregate of data from multiple sources, and so in aggregation it develops a certain writing style. And so if that writing style is fed back into ChatGPT, it will just consult it will consult the database that it trained itself on and not be able to detect it, because it's pulled from that database in the first place to create that writing style. So ChatGPT won't be able to detect its own stuff. But apart from that, why would you think it was a good look to say, here's proof that I didn't write it using ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT? Anyway, let's continue.
This is important. This is about integrity. In fact, the dominant signals in this book point the other way. There's pro-human authorship. There's emotionally driven language. There's escalating rhetoric. There's signature voice writing.
Why did he say rhetoric really strangely? Why did he read it like he was a... He sounds like Brian from the text-to-speech super chat thing. Just very odd.
There's long-range argument structure. There's intentional narrative control. You have deliberately misled people this week by taking some historical quotations.
Where are the quotes from?
Historical quotations which are misattributed.
Just tell me where the quote is from. Just one of them.
Imply,
Just one of them. Where's the
to
Scruton
imply
quote from?
that I have written this
Where's the
book
Hayek quote
based
from?
highly
Can I
on
jump in
AI,
here?
Where are
and
the
you
quotes from?
I
are
am jumping in
incorrect.
here as the
This is the kill shot. Matt, the reason Matt lost this debate is because he comes with pre-prepared lines, a bit like this, the sort of stuff that, you know, the veiled threat that he had clearly practiced in a mirror and was reciting on every podcast he was doing, as well as the, you know, the bit of where he's like, oh, I'm going to knock on a door. Hi, I'm from Restore. We're going to deport you. And Winston Marshall, you know, his sides are just splitting. He came with pre-rehearsed lines that were disconnected from the things that Andy had said. And if you want to be an effective communicator, this is just my number one bit of advice. Given, I think I do pretty well in debates, right? And I have a decent audience with zero promotion, quite the opposite, actually, been cancelled from basically bloody everywhere. Zero overheads, zero funding from outside actors artificially amplifying my stuff, and believe me, there's a lot of people that get that. So I think I have some credentials on this. If you want to be an effective communicator, make sure what you're saying corresponds with reality as closely as possible. And then, if you get something wrong, have the humility to not only work out your thinking in real time for everyone to see, but to say, oh yeah, I don't really have an opinion on that, I haven't read much into it, so I can't really talk about it. Or, oh, no, you might be right, actually, I'll have to check it another time. Or, oh, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, I mean, my commitment to the truth matters more than being perceived as knowing everything, so I'll go away and look that up and issue a correction. Do you see how, like, you don't have to save face? Do you see how you don't have to get histrionic and defend whatever integrity you think to be on the line? Because you don't actually defend your integrity by doing things that are obviously dishonest. And the main kill shot here, the fatal flaw of Matt's defense, is that if he did write his own book, he would know where the quotes are from. Because he would remember pulling the book off its shelf, looking at the book. He's not asking for a direct quotation on the spot. He's not asking for a page number. He's just asking, oh, hey, you quoted Scruton in your book. Do you remember which book of Scruton's you actually read to quote it? Like, for example, let's say I had referenced Roger Scruton's concept of the pre-political we. It's from How to Be a Conservative, which is on the shelf just above that one that's got the Tolkien books on. Or if I had said, hey, Bernard Yack speaks about the need for a linear chain of ancestry and a lateral chain of shared culture and solidarity to keep a nation together. And it's page, I think it's 89, of Nationalism and the Moral Psychology of Community. Okay? Eric Kaufman, his analogy about hosting the World Fair and being told to be content that you're hosting the fair but you don't get to have a booth. That's how unilateral multiculturalism works. That's from White Shift. Like, if you have just done the reading yourself and you've written your own stuff, then you should remember which books you consulted for your own writing. So whether or not the quotes are incorrect because of ChatGPT or because you just misremembered them, where are the actual quotes from? Because if you wrote your own book and you wrote your quotes yourself, you would remember which books you consulted to write your own book. So, did Matt write his own book at all? That's the better question. Because he insists today, in The Spectator, that AI didn't write his book. Okay, he goes through it and he says, after telling Andy that he would absolutely, in 48 hours, issue a correction for any of the quotes that were inaccurate, he also says, a largely unknown left-wing activist named Andy Twelves cobbled together online a list of what he said were factual inaccuracies in my book, along with misquotes, typos, and limited footnotes. Yeah, he pointed out what parts of your book were crap. You're just going for a character attack here. Like, Andy Twelves is now much better known than he was before because you decided to tank your own credibility, Matt, and someone who is a complete ideological enemy, who usually gets a lot of things wrong, right, was able to correspond to the truth closer than you were and just point out the obvious errors and look more credible than you because of your own behaviour. That's an L for you. It's not an insult to Street. Andy Street. Andy Twelves. Sorry, Andy Street's the left-wing Conservative mayor of Greater Manchester. See, even I misquote from time to time. At least I have the due diligence to correct it. Matt says, some of my historical quotations are also imperfect. Imperfect. Again, the euphemism for wrong. For instance, in the book I write that the great Roman orator Cicero said, the state should begin with those who are closest to us. As a world expert on Cicero confirmed to the Times a few days ago, what Cicero said was, the supreme duty of the state was to protect its own citizens. Okay, Matt, why would you need to quote a world expert on Cicero in the Times, writing about how you got Cicero wrong, rather than just consulting the notes or the book on your shelf that you used to write the book? Why would you not be able to say where it is from? Why are you citing this guy who is correcting you rather than getting the quote right the first time if you actually wrote it? Like, none of this makes any sense. He also says, I also misquote Roger Scruton for having said, a society that cannot distinguish its friends from its enemies, or that extends hospitality to those who despise its way of life, is a society that has lost the instinct for survival. Having checked my notes, this is clearly a misquote from Scruton's The Need for Nations, in which he warned of the distinctiveness between those who are entitled to the benefit of the sacrifices that my membership calls from me from those who are interloping, but I got it wrong. Yeah, that's not even remotely the same. Like, is there a syllable there? The word those is in there? Okay. You got one word right. Congratulations. Anyway, how would you not know where that's from, Matt, if you'd written it yourself? Did you ask someone to look it up? And where are all the rest? Because you said you would correct all of the Uranus quotes, and this only has 2 in here. I mean, maybe the Spectator didn't give you enough page space. I certainly know that struggle. What about giant Substack posts with all of the corrections instead? What about just a tweet saying, oh yeah, that's where this is from, that's where this is from. What about a photo of your bookshelf? That'd be a cool idea. What about a photo of your bookshelf with all of the books lined up together that you use to write your own book? Because I've got a bunch of them here, or I own the PDFs, for example. I've got pages and pages of notes that I've made on books, and I'm not a professional academic. I'm just a guy sat in his study who's apparently irrelevant and out of touch. Someone said it could be an AI picture. This is the thing. People are going to make jokes about it now, right? Because you've just torched your own credibility. And so, even the Spectator is trying to make the name Matt GPT and Matt Bad Loss stick. As this scathing article from Sam Leith says, sometimes a nickname comes along so excellently unkind that you know it's going to stick. One such is Matt GPT, which I suspect former fellow academic and failed Reform candidate in the Gorton and Denter by-election, Matt Goodwin, will take to his grave. It's just brutal. I'm going to play the rest of this clip because it's just a masterclass in how not to do a debate.
You should apologise, Andy.
You've had a week.
You should apologise.
Gentlemen, I am jumping in here as the chair. The specific accusation, Matt, is not that you've used AI to write the whole book.
Yeah, that's what Andy said.
The specific accusation that Andy has made today on this show is that there are various quotes that appear in your book that don't have references and that Andy and others can't find in cited literature. So we're not asking, he's not accusing you of writing the whole book by AI. Might do later, but that's not the accusation now. Where did you find those specific quotes?
Let me give you an example, and then I'll come back to the Scruton and the Walker-Connor examples. One of the things I wrote in the book was this: the state should begin with the people closest to us, which was Cicero. Do you know what he actually said, according to a Cicero scholar in the Times this week? The supreme duty of the state is to protect its own citizens.
So not that. Someone in the chat, by the way, I am still reading chat, it's up on screen. Someone in the chat pointed out, Tim Montgomery, who's always had it out for Matt Goodwin, he called him sulphurous when Tim came over to Reform in 2024, has said that Matt needs to be investigated for his lack of intellectual credibility and bringing the party into disrepute. Nobody in Reform seems to have come out in his defence and staked their reputation on it. To the contrary. GB News, inadvertently throwing Matt under the bus. The Spectator is sharpening their knives, and The Spectator, we know, is actually in Reform's corner. It's owned by Paul Marshall, father of Winston Marshall, who also owns GB News, and Unheard, who installed Zia Yusuf, or made the introduction at the very least to Nigel Farage, into Reform, who is in the corner of Robert Jenrick, also, who affiliates with Michael Gove these days. So they're all in, and there's other connections as well that are extensive, but I won't bother listing off. The Marshall Network, Winston himself, Paul, The Spectator, are all in on Reform, and they are burying Matt Goodwin day after day. They're even allowing Matt Goodwin to publish a piece in The Spectator, either as write or reply, or to give him enough rope to hang his own career. And I think it's because Reform now see Matt Goodwin as a liability. After the disastrous interviews on New Culture Forum, especially with Peter McCormack, this debate on GB News, the fact that his book, if it isn't written by AI, may as well be. The fact that he can't answer basic questions like, which books did you read to write the book, Matt? Why did you get so many quotes wrong if you've read the book or written it yourself? And the fact that now he just he has the reputation of being a sore loser, insincere, lacking credibility, and sounding like Alan Partridge. Reform are already slumping in the polls. It's already been a terrible week for them with the Indian defector. Do you really think that they're gonna follow Matt into the abyss? At this point, I wouldn't be shocked if they gave him Gorton and Denton because it was a low priority seat to just get rid of him. Because now he's not an MP. He's not an academic. His GB News show, I don't imagine, gets great ratings. It was getting less ratings than Jacob Rees-Mogg was in the same slot. Where does he go now? Who's ruined their career? Who's lost all political relevance, Matt? That threat aged like milk, didn't it?
So if there are misattributed quotes such as that, they will be corrected within 48 hours. But what Andy and the critics of this book are doing, let's just be clear, Miriam, because it's important. They are focusing on minor typos, like Boris Johnson being in opposition.
It's not a minor typo, it's a fundamental fact.
It's a minor typo.
It's a fact.
It's a minor...
It's not a minor typo. It's the sort of thing that a copy editor, or at least a friend that gave it a quick once-over, should have caught. Also, loads of blatantly fake and inaccurate quotes are not minor typos. They're just fake and inaccurate quotes. It's pretty major.
A typo because they don't want to engage with the argument of this book.
Well, we'll be getting into English as an additional language after this, Matthew.
The argument of this book, let's be clear, is one that you completely disagree with. I would like to ask you a question. What part of the argument of suicide of a nation do you actually disagree with?
Well, I think the whole thing is just based on falsehoods, which we're getting into in the second segment.
Now there we go.
We're getting into the second segment.
Now there we go.
Come on,
This is the problem. Matt Goodwin's lack of credibility allows his opponents, our shared opponents, to dismiss problems like demographic replacement, mass migration, the costs and crimes that are inflicted upon us through a policy of cultural substitution that we didn't want and voted against. It allows them to dismiss it out of hand because it is contaminated by the lack of credibility that Matt Goodwin now has. So, more people will be able to say, oh, that's just bogus, it's been debunked. You're getting that from that stupid book that was written by AI. Complete disaster. Absolute disaster. Oh, and people are asking what was the argument in the book. The argument was mass demographic change has happened. It will continue to happen. But if you want to deport anyone, you're racist. Because that's what he's been going around on the podcast circuit saying. The book is meant to be an advert for voting for reform, but I think that is just an in-kind contribution to Restore Britain's campaigning department. It's like, yes, we acknowledge there's a massive problem. No, we're not going to make up a bunch of fake quotes using ChatGPT, allegedly, to try and sell you on that problem. And no, we're not going to call you racist if you want to fix the problem. Instead, millions must go vote low. So, this total disaster aroused an interesting reaction. Not just from the left, who were burying him and his lack of credibility, but also from the right. And this was noted by Helen Lewis. If any of you don't remember who Helen Lewis was, she was the GQ journalist who had the very adversarial interview with Jordan Peterson back in the day. So I don't hold Helen Lewis in very high esteem. She also wrote a very confused piece on my friends Nina Power, Louise Perry, and Mary Harrington. Like, oh, these are women, but they don't go along with basic shitlib feminist opinions? So I don't think Helen Lewis is a titan intellect. But she wrote, I'm fascinated by how disliked Matt Goodwin is on the right. I expected some tribal wagon circling that just hasn't appeared. Yeah, because it turns out that when those of us who are worried about the complete collapse of our country don't think that this is a football team or a WWE match. We don't, as someone responded to that clip of Matt Goodwin. I saw a response. We don't just want a front row seat to our own destruction, which Matt seems to be promising. Like, sorry Matt, I'm not in this for the career. I'm in this to fix the country. I don't care if this doesn't allow me to get page space in The Spectator or Unheard, if I don't get a GB News show, where, as I said on my most recent Low Seat segment, I have to stop every 15 minutes to shill for catheters and cruises to a bunch of boomers. I don't care if I don't get a safe seat in Reform UK, which is celebrating Labour defectors and Indian nationals as if there's something positive. I don't care. I care about fixing problems. And so when Helen Lewis says, oh, I expected some tribalism here. No, I care about credibility and honesty and integrity. And yes, I care about loyalty. But Matt was also disloyal first. Matt went and attacked young lads who might have otherwise proofread his book for free and saved him the headache. Matt threw them under the Brexit bus to go and rub shoulders with Sikhs and then lose a by-election by about 5,000 votes. Someone also said he nearly choked when he was asked who his proofreaders were. That's also important. He says this was peer-reviewed, and the peer review is anonymous. He says all the stats in this book were peer-reviewed. The stats, not the quotes. And he doesn't say the book itself was properly proofread. Very telling. He still hasn't clarified that. He's also being buried by the newsagents. And again, this is why this is a very important thing. Because the newsagents are saying Matt Goodwin is an embarrassment to reform. And they're saying, well, the trajectory of Goodwin's career was that he started out as a credible academic. He was on the left, he worked with Hope Not Hate, he worked with the government. He was on anti-Muslim hatred boards with Sarah Khan and Saeeda Vorsi and Nick Lowles. And then he took his academic credentials, he picked up his ball and he went home and he moved over to the right. Apparently undergoing this Damascene conversion after Brexit, after the Boris wave, and because he is the father of a daughter. And now, not just that story, but all of his published work has been brought into disrepute because he decided to at least cut corners and use ChatGPT to write his book. And this is allowing the newsagents to have an effective line of attack on the right. This is why Carl is of the belief that Matt is now on a suicide run to try and staple all of our talking points to his own failing career. And he has allowed the newsagents to have an effective line of attack on us by proxy because he's made a prat of himself. And so it is very, very important to distance ourselves from such shoddy scholarship, from such underhanded tactics, from such embarrassing campaigning. And frankly, from reform. Because the longer he and that Bangladeshi student and the Indian national who hates white people so much he wants to play football without them are in reform, then the right in Britain looks like a joke. It looks like a joke dressed up as a teal tribute act to MAGA, which, despite me celebrating Trump's victory in 2024, is also not doing so hot. That's why, I may get in trouble for saying this, a year ago, CPAC in Britain was a good idea. Now, depending on who the guests are, and given who's organising it, it's just going to be wall-to-wall pro-reform stuff. Mark my words, I'd be shocked if Rupert got an invite to speak. But just the aesthetics of CPAC, the blaring music and the neon lights and the loud fireworks and Bibi Netanyahu sort of zooming in for 10 minutes saying we're in the fight for Western civilization, just doesn't resonate. It not only looks like an artificial American import when it's in Hungary or now in Britain, But this just isn't the wavelength that the right needs. The right needs to be principally concerned about its own countries, a demographic replacement, and not to tie its fortunes either to Donald Trump, given he's making some blunders, and domestically to the career that Matt Goodwin covered so much. And as I pointed out here, it is therefore very humorous that we wrap right back around to that New Culture Forum clip. Because Andy 12's actually mentioned Matt's veiled threat against me, Harrison, Downs, on the platform that Peter Whittle created, and he was very fond of us, by the way, and, you know, were he still here, God rest him, he'd be furious that Matt got away with that. Andy actually brought that up during the debate. So now, Matt's vindictive attack lines on young men to his right are being used as lines of attack on his character by those to his left. And so we really are in that scene from Goodfellas where, you know, the camera's on the floor and it's just Joe Pesci and De Niro and Liotta just like relentlessly kicking it. I've seen Parvini post a bunch of GIFs from WWE in recent days where it's like a Royal Rumble and all the guys are ganging up on one, and one's hitting him with a chair and just an elbow drop. That's happening to Matt. And I'm sorry, as judging by the previous clip, can't say we didn't warn you, and you can't say you didn't bring it on yourself.
What do you say to Matt's allegation that you and others are only criticising this book because you disagree with the arguments within it?
I'm criticising it because it's full of lies. I would do the same if it was someone on the left. I actively, you know, the left are far more factional than the right. I actively get amongst it with comrades on the left that I disagree with and that are incorrect.
On the left.
And that are completely incorrect. Well, you know, we'll talk about your comrades on the right, you know, on the New Culture Forum. Was it New Culture Forum? You spoke about the Restore Britain boys and that they'd ruin their credibility. When you put out an AI slot book
Andy's allowed
full
to
of
ask me a lot of
lies.
questions. I can't ask him any questions.
Because you're lying.
Can I ask him one question?
Ooh. Yeah, sure, I agree. His use of the word comrades is cringe, but better the enemy you know, right? Like, he's an honest leftist, he's a member of the Green Party, he's incorrect, but it's better that than Matt Goodwin, you know, who asks you to write his Substack and staff his office and draft his tweets and glaze you in private and then stab you in the back in public and says, well, your career's over. Like, I'd rather face Andy 12s on a debate panel. It might be quite interesting, actually, in the future. Some sort of, like, unfiltered debate thing. That might be quite a good conversation. Never spoken to 12s outside of a studio debate, but it might be interesting. Who knows? I'd rather that than have Matt Goodwin on my side and then stabbing in the back. Again, better the devil you know. And the reason I've brought this up is because, so I shared this. Charlie Downs shared this. Same quote. Matt responded, I stand by every word. I feel sorry for you all. You've made terrible decisions. 5 years from now, you'll see, bookmark this tweet. I have bookmarked it. But I'm sorry, Matt, if we're taking you as a yardstick for terrible decisions, then having your disapproval is basically an endorsement. Speaking of which, let's talk about the prudence of Restore Britain, because it's still going very well. Rupert responded to this, saying, Goodwin made unpleasant and quite sinister career threats to the young men backing Restore Britain. I would heavily suggest he focuses on his own output, or at least upgrade his AI subscriptions. Meanwhile, Restore is holding steady in the polling. It's still at 7% via Find Out Now. And party membership just surpassed the Conservatives' updated, optimistic projection. We heard internally that it was about 113,000, and they said, no, we're still at 123. Okay, but maybe you haven't taken some dead pensioners off the voting rolls yet. But Restore Britain has now surpassed the Conservatives as of today. Again, officially registered 10 days ago, only announced about 6 to 7 weeks ago. And look at the Greens, by the way. The Greens have like doubled their membership within a year because of, again, don't like him, but Zach Polanski's very effective social media campaigning. Same thing could happen to Restore Britain. Restore Britain is basically going to be the mirror image of the Greens on the right. And immediately, as I say that, people go, aha, you're admitting you're the woke right. No. It understands that the political landscape has changed. It understands that young people engage in politics in a very different way. It understands that we have a different set of priorities. It recognises demographic realities, but whereas the Greens want to weaponise immigrant groups against the white majority, Restore Britain want to represent the indigenous British majority and respect their wishes that they voted for before regarding immigration ever since the 70s. And so, what I think you're going to see is Restore Britain's membership increasing in a similar trajectory to the Green Party. And if Reform keep making these needless blunders, well, you're going to see them keep dropping in polls, you're going to see their membership migrate over to Restore Britain, and you're going to see them descend into further infighting. I wouldn't be shocked if Matt gets thrown under the bus in the next few days. And, amusingly, Restore Britain billboards are going up everywhere. Here's Harry Robinson, good lad, reunited with him last week. He's in Swindon. He's found Rupert's billboard in Swindon. It's the only nice-looking thing in Swindon. A side note, yes, I will be coming back to the Lotus Eaters on a guest basis, because as much as I hated the journey in and out of Swindon, I really missed it. And I missed working with the lads. And you know what? Again, there's things I can't say over the last year of working on other projects since I left Lotus Eaters full time, because I signed NDAs. But you forget just how nice it is to work with people that have your back, that are funny, that are intelligent, that do their own work, that aren't engaged in some sort of like bullshit status game. So it's nice to visit, and I'll be visiting again. And that means Harry and I might finally make that Watchmen Comics Corner. Carl will be very upset, but I promise we may end up doing so. Anyway, there are billboards going up everywhere. Rather amusingly, there's one in Clacton and there's one in Boston and Skegness, which is Richard Tice's backyard. As this person says here, we see more of Rupert Lowe in Skegness than Tice now, because Tice keeps jetting off to Dubai, and Tice uses those renter bikes, those green line bikes, to go around Westminster, and he just looks ridiculous in his full suit. I've seen him so many times, it's very funny. The other interesting thing is that they did some polling on the favourability of Restore Britain. Rupert Lowe has the best net favourability, even though he doesn't have the highest recognition rate in the country. And, as Downs points out here, 1 in 10 Zoomers are backing Restore Britain. Now, again, that's after 6 weeks. It's after 10 days of being a registered political party. That is almost on par with Reform, when Farage keeps saying, "We're going to win the UFO. I've got great TikTok numbers. Isn't Jack Anderton a genius?" Now, lots of people are going, "Oh my god, the Greens, 41%. What you have to remember, guys, is that a large portion of Gen Z, are not British. They're the sons and daughters of the Third World, and they are just going to vote for the party that takes stuff from white people and gives it to immigrants. But there are some young men who are voting Green because they are anti-establishment, because they can't get a job, they can't get a house, and they think that the Greens' economic policies are the way to go. They're very vague. Once a large portion of those young men realise that 1, Restore Britain is an anti-establishment party, 2, it isn't going to rattle off the same microwaved, Thatcherite, pull yourself up by your bootstraps rhetoric that has failed us. It's not, unlike Nigel Farage, it's not the Ben Shapiro-esque rhetoric of, well, you can't work from home, you need to move away from your family, you need to live in a rented bedsit 5 to a man, and work with nothing to show for it in London, in effect. And once they realise that the Greens are the party for giving all of the things that they want, housing, job opportunities, and the chance to have a family, to immigrants at their expense again, then a large portion of those men will migrate over to Restore Britain. Someone's just spamming in chat. There we go. And Rupert recognises this. Rupert has said, he's made it very clear that I want Restore Britain to be the political party for young British men who are increasingly pissed off with how our rotten establishment treats them like dirt on their shoe. Lads who have had enough, they're very welcome with us, it's showing. And as I responded, when I first met Rupert, with Harrison and Charlie, thanks to Peter Whittle, in late November 2024, we gave him our criticisms of Reform, mainly about Farage's rhetoric about Islam and mass deportations. Rupert took an hour of feedback, and at the end he said, you know, you're the exact kind of lads that should be standing or getting involved in the party. he took criticism from young people that he had no reason to listen to. He didn't stand to benefit. And he thought, this criticism is well-intended, it's constructive, and we need people that are capable of pointing out our flaws and improving things inside the tent rather than outside it. That sincerity won over our loyalty, which is why, when he was unceremoniously ejected from Reform and had the police called on him, we again had nothing to gain by saying this is wrong. And so, you can't build a political movement on dishonesty, on AI hallucinated quotes, on expedient acceptance of career grifters from the Indian subcontinent, on the weaponization of the law, on lying. You can't build a successful political movement on that. Even if you win an election, you will become incorporated by the system, sabotaged, you will be unsuccessful, and you will be no different than Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives, the Greens, and all of those that you have taken defections from. And so, there's just no point. There is absolutely no point to... There is... Reform serve no discernible purpose anymore because they are indistinguishable from the Uniparty. And there is no point about compromising on your honesty and your integrity in pursuit of power, because compromise will become a way of life and you'll become ineffective when you have that power. And so we just have to build from the bottom up on honesty and integrity and humility and consistency. That's why I put my trust in Rupert. It's going to be difficult. Really difficult. But that's why I hope so. And Rupert has rattled off, again, just on consistency, he has rattled off a series of immigration policies that are just fantastic. Step 1, remove the illegal migrant population. 2 million, 3 million, even more, doesn't matter. They'll all be detained and deported. We'll start with the third world invaders and foreign criminals, a day one priority. Restore Britain will launch the largest deportation scheme in British history. We have the plan. We've already published the most comprehensive deportation scheme ever released. Thank you to Mr. Harrison Pitt for writing that up. More to come on legal migration soon, by the way. That's why Restore Britain have updated their website about potential revoking of citizenships. That's going to need to happen. People need to go. Even if they were brought here legally, even if they were given a citizenship. If they hate us, if they committed a crime, if they are taking more in taxes than they spend, if they're colonizing areas of our country into Lahore or Mogadishu or New Delhi. Sorry, not wanted. You can go. He says, step 2, legal migrants who can't speak English, refuse to work, claim benefits, live in social housing, hate our way of life, or even actively want to do us harm, they go too. Hopefully voluntarily, if not, they will be removed. There are consequences to this. Dual nationals who want to kill us, strip them of British citizenship and send them back. Foreign Islamists, again, I would just use the language of Muslims, gone. Dual nationals, gone. If foreigners want to live in an Islamic country, we will make that a reality for them. This would all be twinned with drastic reductions of the number of people settling in the country, and I mean drastic. It will be in the thousands, not the hundreds of thousands. Who can come? Ultra-high skilled migrants to fill gaps on temporary work visas that do not automatically translate into indefinite leave to remain and may be ineligible for citizenship. And, of course, some spousal visas combined with the red list. Because we don't want a bunch of people coming in, marrying in, exploiting spousal visas, when they're just going to reproduce the culture of their home country that is not compatible with their own. So spousal visas will be made easier, but exclusively for Western and Central Europe, Japan and South Korea, especially after our timeline cleanse we've had on Twitter in the last few days, and certain people from the Anglosphere, because we don't want millions of Indians coming in with Canadian passports. And as he says, we're going to do it alongside the red list. Afghanistan will be top of that list. They've already announced India, Pakistan, Syria, Eritrea, other sorts of countries. It's actually easier to count the number of countries that won't be on the red list than will. The asylum system would be abolished in entirety, ILR would be scrapped, benefits for foreign nationals would be cancelled, social housing currently filled with foreigners would be freed for British families, the whole immigration scam will finally end. And of course, the economic fallout that will be forecast to come, well, one, the OBR will be abolished, so we'll get actual accurate economic forecasting. But it means that work will be meaningful again. People will be able to fill jobs. They won't have to compete with the whole world for one job. And they might be able to own a home and have a family. Perish the thought. Anyway, that's all for that. I will get onto your super chats. And I will, actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's discuss this. Quick thing from Millennial Woes. Now, Millennial Woes writes an excellent Substack. And he's provided some good constructive criticism for Restore, in the spirit of being honest and providing constructive criticism and ensuring that we have people within the movement who feel comfortable voicing their concerns and having them addressed. He points out some potential problems with the party. So, in the expansion phase, expansion means plenty of new activists. This means that some people that put themselves forward as activists will be, as he says, misfits, malcontents, sociopaths, and the types who love to fall out with people and actively create conflict. I've met plenty of these people during my time in Westminster. Some have publicly fallen out with me. Some people who have parasocial relationships with people that they watch on YouTube then misallocate the blame, or they actually invent conflicts whole cloth and try to sow discord within people who know each other in real life. This is always going to happen, because it's actually, in many cases, far less important what a person believes and more importantly what their temperament is, how they act. Because they might be on board for mass deportations, but they might also have BPD, and it's just going to be an absolute nightmare. As Woe says, you have to do the unpopular thing and just say, you can only remove them, you can't reroute them in the system, and it's wise to do so promptly. Now, this is very different to the dishonouring that Reform has done towards its local branches, especially when now you've got Reform candidates in Wales and Scotland stepping down because they've complained about the favouritism of Tory defectors, and they're prioritising over loyalists who have built the grassroots branches from the ground up. So you are going to have to expel people who are just causing infighting, causing trouble, but you do this on the basis, and it's clearly communicated, that this person is just picking fights, sowing discord, and it's not because we're cucking to optics on things like deportations or we don't want to get called mean names by the media. It's just that this person has a fundamental antisocial temperament and they're not a good fit for Reform. Or at the very least, you don't allow them to be branch managers, campaigners, and candidates. Also, he says, ideological spurgs can be extremely useful, but there's a lot of spam in chat, dear lord. I did deputise a few people to be moderators, but they're not doing their job. Ideological spurgs can be extremely useful, but kept in a box. They're great at research, number crunching, strategizing, etc. Don't give them any social responsibilities or prominence. I forget who said this, but it's a quote that's often attributed to Teddy Roosevelt and or Winston Churchill. You want your nerds on tap, not on top. And this is why, you know, I fully recognise I'm like a details-oriented autist. I shouldn't be leading the charge on campaigning. I will never be well, I can't say never, but I'm not best suited to knock on doors or do vox pops like Montgomery Tomes. You got to know your role and you got to allocate your resources accordingly. Also says, expansion will mean bringing professional advisors on board. That's a risk because they won't be familiar with the sort of political party Restore Britain needs to be. They should be chosen carefully. This is Parvini's warning. You don't want an orange in your camp when you're a team of blues, because the orange, whether or not he has a different agenda or just a different temperament, will drag attention and resources away from the task at hand. So it is important to minimise the number of oranges in the core team, especially surrounding Rupert. These are all useful bits of advice. I am putting this on record so that my friends in Restore and the local branch organisers who also are not sat at the top table in Restore and are not in on regular meetings, but should be watchful for this stuff at a local level, watchful for infiltration and sabotage and people with maladaptive personality traits, so that hopefully this message reaches them and that you can act accordingly. Also says two very contentious things. Another risk is non-natives joining. Some will be well-meaning, some entirely self-interested, but all will weaken the resolve and ability of Restore Britain to do what needs to be done. Hold the line. Remember that the native people of Britain are with you, no matter how little diversity you have in the shop window. Resist the urge to take photographs with random minority candidates in order to deflect accusations of racism. Rupert doesn't want to do this, nobody in Restore Britain wants to do this, but just on a local level, guys, no hugging of Sikhs. No performative, here's my black friend, I'm not racist. Like, yeah, I have a black friend, he's really racist. That's why he's my friend. But you don't want to engage in performative virtue signalling because you don't want to send the message that Restore is worried about accusations of racism from people who have wrecked the country and used the term racism to cover up atrocities. Racism, as defined by the newsagents, means nothing. And so you respond with, I don't care, not, quick, take a photo with as many diverse people as possible. And then the other thing that is included here, don't accept Zionist funders. This is the death knell for any pro-European organisation. It happens time after time, and Restore Britain would be no different. And then he disparages Douglas Murray. I've met Douglas, very nice guy. I don't share his focus on geopolitics and Israel. I care more about my own country. But Douglas is pretty sound on things like immigration, demographics, and Islam. So I don't think Douglas needs to be insulted. But he does make the point here, Millennial Woes, says, it is a key aspect of the farce of British politics that every party has a Friends of Israel organisation. Restore Britain will not have a Friends of Israel organisation. We're not interested in sectarian pandering. The only religion that will receive political representation and consideration from Restore Britain is our historic one, Christianity. If people of other religions and ethnicities want to vote for Restore Britain, they are welcome to do so, but special pleading will not be given quarter. And as far as Zionist funding goes, again, this does not mean one needs to be antagonistic to Jewish people. But I have noticed, in my time in the trenches, building institutions, that unless an entity is expressly concerned with the fate of Israel as a core policy issue, then you will be starved of funding. And that funding is used to make Israel a priority issue. I don't care how one feels about Israel. Despite having visited, I feel the same about Israel as I do about Iceland. Not my country, not my people, not my culture. You can keep it if you can defend it. But if you do, as Millennial Wars points out, if you do make your political operation reliant on a large amount of funding that comes with the strings attached of, you must give special consideration to Israel, you must have a Friends of Israel group, then again, it just siphons off energy away from the project. So I say to, my Jewish friends or Jews that support Restore Britain, do not be discouraged if Restore Britain does not speak in terms of Judeo-Christian values, does not have a Friends of Israel group, does not have a Jews for Reform formal group. Because one, it would be safer for you to live in a mainly British Christian country anyway than a Muslim one. But two, the mission is more important than any special pleading by any group. And you're just going to have to put up with it. Sorry. And then he talks about infiltrators, media spies, hope not hate. I've already spoken about MI5 infiltration. This is on the radar. It is very important. And then the main point is made about electioneering. The core message of Restore Britain, as long as you hold the line, will be, we want to represent the British people first, and we are primarily concerned with their well-being and securing their demographic possession of their country, their cultural dominance, their peace and their prosperity. That will resonate as long as you don't retreat from that line. And I think he's correct. And that will provide a gathering point for the people who have become disillusioned with reform for all of the reasons we went through earlier. Anyway, I will now go through your super chats. Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, that was useful. And $4.99 from EV King. Thank you very much. Gone, the form of man, rise the demon Etrigan. We all knew that Farage was a wussy, but we can now see he is a... I can't see the rest of that super chat. I'm going to try and get that up. I don't know why there's an Etrigan the Demon reference, but hey, I appreciate it. Etrigan's one of my favourite magical characters. So, good reference. Dreadnought Logan for $2. Nigel lost his aura and is now cooked. Yes, seemingly so. Tara Dale for £5. Can we actually back our demographic security? It says that we need Nuremberg trials. When you say British, do you mean English, Irish, Scottish and Welsh only? Yes, that's what British means. There is the contemporary fiction that a British passport makes you British. That is, you might have British citizenship or you might be a subject to the crown, but that does not make you British in the sense that British has meant for the last few hundred years. And so it is not mean to people of different heritages to say that being British is about having at least one English, Irish, Scottish or Welsh parent. Gorgeous Mayhem for $5. Confused about Goodwin. He seemed based. Matt, right-wing skin suit man, lol. Yes. I don't know. Genuinely, I don't know. I think Matt has made so many concessions, as he said to me once. He's eaten so much shit to sit at the head table that now he has sunk a lot of costs into reform and feels very protective about it. And because he's sunk so many costs, he has to tell himself that all of the sacrifices he's made and the compromises on his integrity are worth it. And I'm sorry, it doesn't seem that they have been. People are saying all Cornish. The Cornish haunt me in this chat. Anytime I say English, Scottish, Welsh or Irish, someone goes, oh yes, and Cornwall. It's like, yes, okay. Okay, I get it. And when you get independence, I will cut it out of the sentence. Sure, the Cornish. Fine. You're worse than vegans and cyclists. Gorgeous Mayhem also said, why do some people have a problem with Tommy Robinson? Because they think that he is confining his complaints to immigration to purely Islam as an ideology, and that if all Muslims renounced Islam tomorrow, then they could all... immigration wouldn't be a problem. He said that. And also, they think that his focus on Israel and foreign policy detracts from focus on the problems at home. Which... I mean, I have some sympathy with that argument. I'm not antagonistic to Tommy Robinson at all. He's been complimentary about my work, for which I'm grateful, and I think he's done excellent work, exposing the Pakistani grooming gangs and Hope Not Hate. So I'm not going to insult the man, just explaining what people's current issues with him are. I've actually done a video on what I think he gets wrong about immigration, and hopefully it was taken in good faith if it was watched. Opinionated Observer for $9.99. Love your work. With reform flirting to MI5 to vet candidates, is it a stretch to believe reform will be the bridge for them to spy on Restore or directly attack by proxy? It's not impossible. I mean, it could well be, a reform defector that has communications with someone over at MI5. And before I'm accused of conspiracy theories, that sort of thing did happen to UKIP and the referendum party. It's doubtless happened to other parties. It happened with a conservative defect, the National Front, for example. And I'm not comparing Restore to any of those organisations. It's just, we know the intent is there. So we need to be very vigilant about it. Civil Defence UK for £10. Matt GPT won't buy you a beer, what I will. Well, thank you, sir. I don't drink anymore, but I appreciate it. Jamie Smith for £5. Did the Low Ceases lads give you the Michael Gove plush they have? It'll look good on your shelf. They have a Michael Gove plush? Yeah, I'll pass on that. Thank you very much. But no, it's very good to be back anyway. Civil defence for £5. Farage will toss Matt under the bus. Possibly. SG for £5. Do your ears and nose come off like Mr. Potato Head? Unfortunately not. It would be a wonderful party trick, and I could probably make a lot more money doing that than my very meagre salary trying to fix the problems of my country. But anyway, it's always amused me that sort of people make ear jokes on my behalf. I mean, one, I make them. Two, I've heard them all before. But three, like, it's never stopped me. I've always been relatively successful with women, and it's never stopped me. So, and my wife quite likes them. So I don't know why, but she does. Though she calls them cute, which makes me feel like I'm like a retarded puppy. Anyway, R. Rob or Ross for £5. First local restore meeting last week. Went to the pub, which was packed. Couldn't figure out which table it was. It was the whole pub. Excellent news. Word is getting out. And I'll be showing up to some of them in my local area once Lewis lets me know when they're actually on. I hope his event is going well tonight. Yeah, Dragon Ladies just put a thing in the chat. Thank you for being a member. Handles, Connor. Exactly. I always just said, look, my love handles are just higher up. Civil Defence UK for £2. Carl call you a knobhead. And he's right. Alistair for £5. Hi, Connor. Consider Streamlabs donations so you keep 95% of it. Yeah, I don't know how to set that up, honestly, and it's easier for people to send super chats, so I just do whatever's easier for the audience. If someone much more learned in streaming tech understands how to set all this stuff up, please let me know. I had a chat with the guys from Rumble, actually, and they said they were going to help me set up simultaneous streaming to Rumble, and I sent off another email and they haven't responded yet. But eventually, I'll try and do that too. It's always useful to have a backup as well, because, the UK government's going to start pressuring YouTube into censoring people, and so this channel's probably going to get demonetized and censored. Oh! I forgot about that. 1 second. 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. I have some fantastic news for everyone. Did you know that someone who was banned and censored, the original unjust cancellation, is back? He's actually back on YouTube. That's right. Stefan Molyneux's back on YouTube. Wild. I'm going to put the link in chat because I think it is a crime that because of cancellations, I have more subscribers than Stefan Molyneux. That just shouldn't be the case. Stefan Molyneux deserves to get right back to his original subscriber count, up in the millions, and all of you should go over, drop a subscription, let him know that I sent you over. He's still doing good and nourishing stuff. So, and Molyneux, he's always been an absolute gentleman to me. I interviewed him on my old show. He congratulated me for my wedding, and he's an eccentric, but he's I think he has everyone's best interests at heart. And I wouldn't be nearly the communicator, nor would I be able to resolve my personal disputes in nearly as a constructive way if I hadn't been listening to Stefan for many years. So, very good stuff. How do I turn off? There we go. Right. 20 Canadian dollars from G. I'm regrettably Canadian. Well, why didn't you type this in Hindi? It's hard to explain the grooming gangs to normies without missing things. I think you would be best to make a grooming gangs explained in 5 minutes type video to show co-workers a red pill microdose. Yeah, I find short videos quite difficult, actually, to really boil it down. But, again, you're welcome to clip my existing content. Or, there's plenty of articles out there. I've written quite a few articles. But I'll consider it. Saint, thank you for £2. Jenny, from £10. Question from the chat. What do you think of the EU vote to detain and deport illegals? I haven't looked too much into the legislation. As far as I understand it, it's a conciliatory effort to allow it to happen, but they retain a series of logistical problems in the way, and also it's selectively applied to some nations. So, for example, the Poles have decided not to take loads of fake refugees, and they haven't been fined, but the Hungarians are getting fined like a million euros a day and an extra 200 million from the European Court of Justice, and it's still hung over their head. So I'll look into it. $5, reply if you're a bot. Beep boop. £10. Hi Connor, love your stuff. In North Wales and looking for a store branch. I filled in the form a few weeks ago. I have no expertise in starting a branch. Can you advise? Unfortunately, I can't, because I'm not involved in that. I assume it's going to get round to it. I don't know what the internal info pack is given to branch organisers. I assume it's instructions on, you know, sending out emails to people that are registered with postcodes in your given area, and how to the rules and conduct for starting up a Facebook page and Twitter account and things like that. I would send another email to Lewis if he hasn't responded to you yet, but understand he's very busy. And $1.99 from JM. Want to get involved in Scotland? How do we do it? Again, send another email to Lewis. That's probably the best way to do. He's currently handling all that stuff. The team needs to expand, but you will undoubtedly get a response very soon. Anyway, thank you all very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed that one. Hope it was a good laugh. I will be back this week with a couple of videos, possibly another stream. Till then, enjoy your dinner. I'm about to enjoy mine. Take care. God bless. And goodbye.